I think.
Yeah,
because it was before the moon landing. That's why it blew me away so much, because it was before the moon landing, and it was like, how on earth have you done this? Like, we have not landed on the moon, and yet you're telling a story about moon colonies and landing on Jupiter and stuff. It's like, you're a genius.
But that's why Stanley Kubrick was so good directing the moon landing.
Yeah. Like, obviously.
Yeah, that's what that was. Do you not know?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. But yes, no.
You wait till the Avril Lavigne has been replaced by a clone movie.
No, it wasn't a clone. It was a body double. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. How are we doing? Hopefully you're all well. Welcome to the Forever DM. Welcome back to the Forever DM. The hardy to the Laurel and Hardy that is Clash of Quests, which is every Saturday. Tune in, where you get to see a bunch of Forever DMs. As a group, we decided to play D&D because we're all sick of being DMs, and we each take it in turns, one level at a time. Tune in. It's an absolute cluster at the very least. We will see you there. Anyway, back to the show. So, the Forever DM. This week, we are interviewing possibly the man with the coolest name that we've certainly come across, which is Zav. How are you doing, my friend? You okay?
I am fantastic, thank you. It's always a pleasure to watch an ordinary man turn into a podcast host before your very eyes. You go from, to hello, everyone.
That is true. We've just spent the last few minutes just chatting, breaking the ice, I guess. And then, you got to do the podcast. You can't just talk like a normal human being.
Yeah, of course.
You've got to transform.
If I want to talk to a normal human being, I just go outside. I'm not allowed to do that anymore. So, like...
this is it. These are the form of human beings that we're allowed to deal with these days. No more normal people. What edition are you playing at the moment?
I'm playing 5th because I'm a D&D baby. I started playing about 3 years ago, which I can't remember when 5th came out. But I mean, when I looked up how do you play D&D, everything was 5th.
So I guess it's 5th edition it is then, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. In the last few years, have you dived into any other edition, or have you just stuck with 5th?
I've dabbled a bit in 3.5 because I sort of met a few people who've been playing D&D for a while, and they seem to think that 3.5, people seem to consider it to be the best, the most timeless sort of version of D&D. And obviously that's up for debate. But I mean, it's difficult to beat the simplicity of 5e as far as I've sort of seen. It's just so sleek. You can explain it to someone in about 10 minutes. You can hand them a sheet, like explain as you go along, and you can have a game. It's just the easiest thing in the world.
I agree. The simplicity of 5e is magnificent. If we would have had the D&D Resurgence boom, 3.5 or God forbid 4th edition, then I think it would have been very, very different.
Yeah, but also I think part of the Resurgence is because it's so simple. Like, obviously it would have been a nightmare if we'd had the Resurgence and it was a difficult edition, but it got a bit of momentum, and then it just carried on because people picked up a book and were like, hang on, this actually isn't hard. Because I mean, you look at D&D and you find a character sheet and you're like, oh my God, what is this? There's just numbers everywhere. There's all these words, like what do they all mean? But actually it's the simplest edition ever to be broken down. Like you can break it down into its constituent parts so easily. And I think that's probably part of why the Resurgence happened at all.
The amount of players that I've brought on board in the last few years has been absolutely insane. Yeah, purely based on because, you show them this crazy character sheet and you're just like, just roll these math rocks. This math rock does this thing. This does this thing. And that is it. Like, you tell me what you want to do and we'll do it.
I actually had one player who I managed to get into the game basically because I had this huge dice collection. He was like, why do you have so many? And I sort of started explaining what D&D was. And he wasn't really captivated until he rolled a D20. And because it was not a cube and it rolled so nicely, he was like, I could get into this. And I was like, so you want to play the game? He was like, no, I just want 8 of these.
Wow, that's slightly unusual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a dice collector, like a dice goblin without actually playing D&D.
Yeah, I mean, he does play D&D now and he's very into it. But the gateway drug was D20s.
The gateway drug was D20s. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like it's because they're so pretty. Like dice, man. Like you need several million sets, and even then, it's not enough.
The forbidden candy. You just want to. There's something about them. It's like that Tide Pod thing. You just look at them and you're like, oh, you know what?
The D20 challenge. Yeah, sure. Let's hopefully
don't say that out loud. Gen Z will do anything.
I was going to say, hopefully this podcast, when this podcast drops, TikTok isn't a thing anymore because that will become a thing. Like everyone will be doing the D20 challenge. I don't know what that is. I am not backing that. I don't condone
It will
the
be
D20 challenge.
It will be going somewhere it shouldn't go. That's what the challenge is going to be.
Dice sales will go through the roof, though. So there is that.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always a bonus. Like
I'll go through the roof and then into their bodies. Yeah.
Oh, what a horrific image.
I know. Yeah, sorry, that's not a good start. Should we start again?
God, no, that's staying in. Because, you know, as a DM, you know that theatre of the mind is the most effective way of playing. So, you know, imagination, always through the roof.
Yeah, exactly. We'll leave you with that.
So, yeah, we'll leave there and we'll segue into your players. So, have you got like core players at the moment, or are you running a campaign, like a bunch of one-shots? How are you dealing at the moment?
At the moment, we've sort of started a new system where we call it the guild system, and it's definitely not original. I'm sure someone's come up with it, but because I was DMing all the time, and because of quarantine, we can't interact with each other in quite the same way. So what we did is we made a guild within Waterdeep of like, I think 16 characters, something like that. And 4 of them belong to each of us. And we have a rotating roster each game where one person DMs and then they organize a mission for members of that guild to go on. And then you can make up a party from one of your 4 characters and one of the characters of your other players. And we found that that's a really nice system because that way everyone takes turns, but also it's all still in the same world, but no one's stepping on each other's toes because everyone's got their own storylines. It's been absolutely fantastic. But before that, we sort of had a reasonably long-running Curse of Strahd campaign that I was DMing, but we will return to it. But it sort of became not really feasible after a while because, you know, we all had a lot of work to do and quarantine happened and we just weren't able to meet up anywhere near as much.
I must admit, I'm more of a, well, first off, I am a forever DM, so I never get to play anyway.
Yeah.
Curse of Strahd, I refuse to run Curse of Strahd because I want to play it.
Oh, like, yes, this is true.
Out of all the modules, Curse of Strahd is like, I'll run anything. Dragon Queen, Abyss, Apocalypse, whatever you want. Curse of Strahd, no, I want to play it. Like, I want to play that game.
But it's one of those things where the joy of being a DM for me is partially because when I'm not playing, I'm making characters all the time, like characters that I will absolutely never use. I'm on D&D Beyond, rolling up characters that will never, ever be touched again. But so I just really love making these interesting people who live in this world. And Curse of Strahd as a villain is a character that I would just want to play. Just as a player, I love a vampire, but also I love these sort of Machiavellian, almost slightly, I don't want to use the word sexual because it's not quite like, but it's just, there's something like slightly aggressive, almost like Moriarty-ish about him. That is just so good. He's a character, because he's sort of everywhere within Ravenloft, he can turn up whenever you want. And you just get this feeling of he's like all-knowing, he's all-seeing, and you just slip into this kind of, well, hello, everyone, kind of thing. Like this, and it's just, he's such an amazing character to play.
Okay, so talking of, out of the NPCs that you've ever created, is Curse of Strahd your favourite?
Ooh, I think Strahd is a dangerous one, because I find him to be... I love Strahd just more than life itself, but he is a properly awful person. And in D&D, there's a lot of monster slaying. Your players will come into contact with lots of nasty things that want to kill them. But Strahd, he wants to hurt them in ways that aren't necessarily physical. He's big into this sort of psychological horror. He wants you to feel like he's everywhere. He wants to hurt your feelings and he wants to make you feel like nothing. And it's very difficult to do that to a character without doing that to a player. So I absolutely love him, but I had to have a couple of discussions with my players after a session where I went, right, Strahd said some things to your character, and I just want to make sure that it didn't hit on any real life insecurities. And like, if it did, please let me know. He won't touch that again. Well, it's one of those things where it's a really, really delicate balance. In terms of NPCs that I've created, there are 2 sort of shopkeepers that I really like. I made a Gilmore-esque, a sort of Critical Role Gilmore-esque sorcerer called Archibald Pelago, archipelago, which was brilliant, who was like a swashbuckling sorcerer who'd been around the world. He'd collected loads of stuff and brought it all together into this one shop. And he was really camp, really outgoing. He was brilliant. But then also a sort of more gritty one was based off something I saw on Pinterest, actually, which was a red dragonborn who was a blacksmith. And he didn't have a furnace or anything. He just would hammer and breathe onto these swords as he made them, heating them up. And it was just he was a really gruff, not very personable character, but just the image of this blacksmith without a forge, just sort of doing it all on his own steam. He was just such a powerful, kind of intimidating character, and the players just absolutely loved him. He was one of those people who I thought was cool, but I didn't think anyone else was going to find cool. And then when it turns out that other people like him, it's just, my heart.
Quite an imposing image. That works really well. The idea behind this podcast is that people get to listen to just regular old DMs, regular DMs and their experiences. And also, for a fact that someone is stealing your characters.
Yeah, definitely.
It's fine. A good DM steals. We know this.
Yeah, that's the dream. If someone steals my characters, find a way to let me know, because I would be so happy.
Have you got like an Instagram or anything that the people could follow you on?
I'm starting a new podcast, which will probably be the method of contacting me. It's on Twitter.
Yeah, Nerd Homework.
At Nerd Homework. Yeah, on Twitter we're at Nerd Homework Podcast. So that already exists. So regardless of where we are in the process, if people want to send me a message on that will be the way.
All right, yeah, do it.
Yeah.
I just simply I stole your character.
Yeah, exactly.
Which one? You got to tell you got to tell Zab which one though, because I think I'll be stealing Archie.
I do like Archie. He is a good one. One.
The players that you currently have, have you been playing with them for a while?
Yeah, well, I've pretty blessed with some very nerdy friends in very late high school, like borderline uni kind of thing. So when I I was speaking to one of them, and he sort of mentioned D&D. He was like, have you ever played? Have you ever gotten into it? And I hadn't, but neither had he, but we were just like, you know what, let's try and get some friends together and play a game. We did. There was a group of 3 players, and actually the only person who hasn't survived to our most recent party is the original person who wanted to play. He sort of lost interest after a while, and then we brought another person in. But other than that, the same core people have been there since the beginning, which is really nice. I've had a few offshoot games with other people, but that is lovely.
That is very rare as well. That's super cool. What table rules have you got?
I have an absolutely huge document somewhere of like session 0 rules for the game. And in terms of actual hard rules, I don't know if we have any in particular.
So like, for instance, the famous one is phones on the table. I think I ask every single DM about their sort of their house rules in general, but certainly phones at the table, because it's always a contentious topic. Always. Yeah.
I again, like my players are two out of 3 of my core group at least they just get they're so role play focused. Like they're so in the moment they start playing, they I don't say anything about their phones, but their phones are in their bags on silent. They just don't give a toss.
Every DM listening to this is so jealous of you.
Yeah, I know. Right. I know. It's because part of the game is just to get involved and sort of be a bit silly and have these interactions between characters. And I just try and always have either, I think probably the main thing is I try my best not to say the kinds of things that people aren't interested in hearing. I think that perhaps that might be the secret, and that makes it sound like I'm this fantastic, incredible DM. But actually, I think I've just learned over time that if I am boring, my players will let me know that I'm boring. So you've just got to do your best to try and make sure that either you're giving a detailed description or key information, or playing an interesting character. And then by and large, if you've got the right players, which I do, I'm very blessed with great players, they sort of always want to be involved. They want to be able to produce that sort of response. One guy I know always plays really witty, sort of quick characters. So he loves to be involved in those conversations and if he's on his phone, he knows he'll miss something and he needs to have that riposte. He needs to have that retort. So, if his phone's away, I've got a player who's really, really into note taking. So his phone's away because if he misses anything, then he won't have it written down, and then he's going to be in trouble. My final player is just sort of like, well, no one else is using their phones. Like he would definitely be on it if he could, but I think he feels some social pressure.
It sounds like you have the perfect party.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It is.
If you could go back a few years to a burgeoning Xav as he leafs through the player's handbook with a tiny droplet of sweat dripping down his forehead as he realizes he's in too deep.
Yeah.
Like what piece of advice would you give him, or pieces of advice would you give him?
I'd probably say, don't worry about killing your players. And that sounds really dark, and I don't mean go out and kill them. That's not what that's
actually
not quite
kill your players.
Yeah, actually kill them. But I mean their characters. I mean, not the players. Definitely don't kill your players. The main thing is that I used to spend hours, and I mean hours, balancing encounters, which is such a strangely specific thing to sort of get focused on. But I was because they're my close friends, and I was so worried about getting into a position where I'd TPK'd them, and it was the end of the story, and they were going to be so upset with me. But actually, what happens when you balance combats by the book is your monsters get absolutely destroyed because you're running the monster probably not tactically optimally, because I am but one man. And they're coming up with ideas, they're communicating with each other, they're flanking, their survival instincts kick in, and they nearly always win if it's balanced. And if it's unbalanced, then you can just dial it down on the fly. It's one thing where if you get halfway through a fight and you're like, wow, this is going to absolutely destroy all of them, you just chop 20 hit points off it and you're golden. Like, you're absolutely fine. And I think lots of players probably, if they knew about that, they might think that takes away from the experience a bit, because they're thinking, oh, they're taking it easy on us. But actually, it's all smoke and mirrors. The whole DM experience is smoke and mirrors. No one knows what's going on behind the screen. You can sort of do what you want.
That's the biggest thing. Like, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
The DM has a vague idea what they're doing sometimes.
Exactly. It's like that. There was quite a popular sort of D&D meme that was circulating around the internet a while ago, where one of the players says, you've got this whole world planned out, don't you? And the DM goes, yes. And there's just a sticky note that says sexy Goblin on the inside of the DM screen. And it's like, yeah, that's the one.
Sorry, that really tickled me.
That's all right. It is one of my favorites, I have to say.
All my campaigns are always planned out, down to the absolute, every single last NPC and every street name and the economy, the whole shebang. What would be your favorite ever DM moment?
Oh, man. There were a couple of good Strad speeches, which I was very proud of. You do get a couple of oh shit moments as Strad, because he's, again, can turn up anywhere, and his presentation is everything. He's obviously incredibly powerful, but he's a bit of a pretty boy. He's big into image. He loves an entrance. So you get these lovely moments where he turns up out of nowhere unexpectedly, and it's great. But probably my favorite, actually, this is not going to be fantastic for your listeners, because I've got something to show you that I'm working on at the moment, but maps. Maps are always good, and I am someone who really gets into world building and doing maps. And when you hand over a map that you've been working on, I've been drawing this. When you hand that over to your players, it is, and they like it. It's just the most incredible feeling in the world, because you put so much thought and so much planning into these things. And
so, sadly, this is audio only. We did talk about doing this as a visual medium, but then we decided against it because we realized that we'd have to tell the people that we're interviewing, we'll give them some notice. Just show up in pajamas. Although you are looking super casual in your armchair, which is also quite ironic, as you're the first British person that we've actually managed to interview, and you are sitting in an armchair. Anyway,
that's the way.
I just want to briefly describe what I just witnessed. I think my mouth was literally hanging open as you showed that map. Like, that was like that's hardcore cartography. Like that was amazing.
Thank you.
That was like a proper map.
I put quite a lot of effort into them, because Colville fans will know verisimilitude is everything. The feeling of the world being real is absolutely everything. And actually, if you manage to find the joy in world building, because it can get really tedious sometimes, let's be honest. You get a couple of hours into what you thought was going to be the best idea ever. I am Tolkien, I am God. You get a little bit into that, and then you're like, this is terrible. Why did I do this? This is so boring. I don't care about the politics. Like, I don't want to know who the king is. I don't want to know who the king's dad is. I don't want to know who that dad is. You get into all these mutually little ridiculous things. But then, like, sometimes you hit where you're like, actually, it's really interesting to know about the geography of this place, or the history of this place, or the pantheon, or the gods. I don't know, or just the structures within your world. Like, when you find the joy in that, that is such a wonderful thing, because it takes away all the difficulty of being a DM, I think, because all the difficulty comes from tedium. It's never really bad, but it can be very tedious. And if you manage to find the joy in the tedious things, then actually kind of the whole job, becomes a lot easier, I think.
Honestly, I'm starting to believe that you are one of the best DMs that I've ever met. Like, not only are you lucky enough to have an extraordinary party, but I think most people listening to this are going to be new DMs. Everyone wants to achieve what you currently have, which is a really good party, an engaged party, and a DM that cares enough about their players to prep the tedious tiny details and make a map that impressive. Like that, I'm sorry, but that was genuinely an impressive map. Like, to put it into perspective, my maps tend to be squiggly lines with a couple of squares, and I'm like, this, you are here. But that was genuinely,
that is obviously
like, I mean, to be fair, through this podcast, we've met some really amazing DMs, like some really standout DMs. And when you listen to this podcast, you will listen to those amazing DMs. There are amazing DMs that we've managed to meet. I've managed to talk to, and you rank, my friend. You are what we all aim to do, which is provide an amazing experience. I'm genuinely impressed by that.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. But also, it's like, I don't know if any of your listeners are going to be football fans or soccer fans if you're American, sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot of Yanks listening. We're going to have to put all this through a translation matrix after we finish recording.
I think Pep Guardiola, who is a famous football manager, gave an interview a while ago when some sort of snarky reporter said, oh, but can you win without Messi and Xavi, who are like two very famous, very good football players? And he said, of course I can't. What a ridiculous statement. Of course I can't win without good players. Like, I could be the best manager in the world, but if I've got terrible players, what can I do? And I think it's sort of the same thing. Like, you're very kind to say that I'm a decent DM, but actually, in the end, the stories, the experiences come from your players. So I am just there to point them in a direction and have them tell me a story. So, it doesn't get much better than that.
Okay, so based off the fact that clearly you have one or two decent DM skills, just one or two. That's it. That's all you're getting. I've given you enough ego now.
I can only count to two anyway. If you did any more, I'd be really confused.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Beyond two, I'm lost. Have you ever been in a situation where you've kind of almost slid into DM mode in other social situations, like at work, or I mean, we won't tell anyone where you work, but like like at work, or if you're out and about, have you ever kind of used those innate DM skills?
Being able to improvise is such a big thing just in life and just in social interactions with people. I am a strange combination of either incredibly extroverted or incredibly introverted. There isn't, the whole middle of that is grey. I am either cowering in a corner, or I'm like, everyone look at me, I'm the most important thing in this room now. Social situations can occasionally be quite hard, and the ability to sort of, because it's very conversational, D&D, so the ability to sort of bounce off people, it makes you a better conversationalist, which makes you more confident, and B, I think it just makes you more pleasant to be around. It's just, you're able to respond to situations much better. And I am a medical student at the moment, coming towards the end of my degree, and actually the conversational skills that I sort of picked up being a DM, and the ability to respond to sort of anything that people chuck at you, it's so important, because the two groups of people who say the most ridiculous things are D&D players and medical patients. Those are the two groups. And the ability to sort of go, and take that in your stride and carry on with what you're doing is so valuable. It really is.
There's a t-shirt in that somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know.
Fair enough. Okay.
About 3 people would buy it, but
Yeah, but those 3 people would really enjoy that t-shirt.
That's true. And also, I don't know how many 3 years, as we've just discussed. I get up to 2 and I'm lost.
Also true, yeah. It's getting into the last section of this podcast, which is my personal favorite, because you have had no pre-warning to this. So the way that this tends to work is that we have a little bit of a preamble before we start recording. And it's not much of a preamble, just a small introduction kind of thing. And then we launch straight into the podcast. Well, the last section of the podcast is kind of we've got to know you over the last half an hour or so. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to recommend me and everyone listening a movie, a TV show, and a book. Now, it doesn't have to be D&D related. If it is, sure, amazing crossover.
Okay. Movie.
Mm-hmm.
Largely because I watched it really recently. 2001: A Space Odyssey. That is an incredible film, but it is utterly bizarre. It is one of the strangest things you will ever experience as a human being. Forget films as a medium. You will be sitting at the end and you will have to really concentrate on not collapsing, because we're so used to being sort of spoon-fed plot and spoon-fed character, especially I love superhero films. I love superhero films. I'm a nerd.
You understand who our demographic are, right?
Yeah, of course. But there's not much nuance in a Marvel film. There's a lot of punching. There's nice dialogue. It's quite quick. It's funny, but there's not much thinking on your part. 2001 does not try to spoon feed you a film. It goes, here's a thing, do with it what you will. And there's a lot of thought that you have to put into it to sort of have a good experience, which is great. And it's almost like D&D in that way, in that you can chuck plot at your characters, but actually if you don't latch onto anything, if you don't pay attention, you get nothing out of it. So I think 2001 actually indirectly is a bit more of a D&D experience than most films.
So 2001: A Space Odyssey is, first off, yeah, I agree, an amazing piece of film. Stanley Kubrick is an amazing filmmaker.
Very strange man, but that's probably why he was so good.
Yeah. There's a whole other podcast later on. Tune in for part 2 where we talk about Stanley Kubrick. Jesus Christ, that is a rabbit hole. But it's a film that is designed it's very much a theater movie. If you ever get a chance, your local cinema ever plays 2001: A Space Odyssey, even if you've already seen it, please go watch that at the cinema.
Yeah, I've never had the pleasure of seeing it at the cinema, but I imagine it's just a transcendent experience.
I kid you not. So I was very lucky to work at a very high-end cinema a good few years ago. Very poncy. I will tell you who that is after we stop recording.
Okay.
Pretty easy to guess if you live in the UK anyway. But yeah, they showed it for the anniversary screening. I stood in that screen for sadly, I had to work it. The ticket sold out in minutes. But I stood in that screen for the opening, and it's...
Ooh. Was that maybe... The anniversary was last year, right? Or 2018, maybe? 2018.
It must have been 18.
It was 68, wasn't it?
I
think. Yeah, because it was before the moon landing. That's why it blew me away so much, because it was before the moon landing. And it was like, how on earth have you done this? We have not landed on the moon, and yet you're telling a story about moon colonies and landing on Jupiter and stuff. It's like, you're a genius.
But that's why Stanley Kubrick was so good directing the moon landing.
Yeah. Obviously.
that's what that was. Do you not know?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. But yes, no.
You wait till the Avril Lavigne has been replaced by a clone movie.
It wasn't a clone. It was a body double.
Oh, sorry.
Was it Claire? Is that her name? Something like that.
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, Avril Lavigne.
But she hasn't made any good music since she died anyway. So that should have been a tip off.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was pre-girlfriend. She died, and then it was a body double that took over. We need to do a conspiracy podcast after this. So the movie 2001: Space, amazing choice. What are you going to go for next?
The Color of Magic, which is the first Discworld book by Terry Pratchett. That is an absolutely phenomenal book. It is, and again, feels very D&D because all of D&D, you start telling the story of the Hobbit, and you end up with Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail, right? You end up with like this ridiculous sort of in fantasy parody of fantasy, and Discworld is both a fantasy and a parody of fantasy, which is why it's so good, because Terry Pratchett is not only a fantastic world builder, but he just is a king of taking the piss. So, so this whole book is just made up entirely of somewhere between, wow, this is really cool, and wow, this is hilarious. So, I mean, I cannot recommend that enough. And the number of characters and NPCs I've stolen from those books, they're just, cannot recommend them enough.
So I'm a massive Pratchett fan. Yeah, Colour of Magic, 100% back that. But now all you've made me want to do is run a D&D game where the Knack McFeagles somewhere in that game.
Yeah.
I think I'll just create a new goal for myself.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's what quarantine's about, making goals and achieving them.
Roll a perception check. 16. You hear Crivens off to the center. You see nothing. Well, yeah, good choice. I agree. Terry Pratchett is an amazing author. I don't think there's one book I've read by Terry Pratchett that hasn't been. He's a genius. Truly.
There's a lot of Discworld, though. There's a lot of it. Oh my God, how many Discworld books are there? And it might be 50. I'm not even joking.
I was going to say
there's so many.
I was trying to imagine them like my bookshelf, and I know the fact that it's more than one shelf.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's pretty much. Did you ever get around to reading Nation?
Oh, I don't think so. No.
Do yourself a massive favor. So yeah, give it a go. So it's not Discworld.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nation. Yeah, by Terry Pratchett. Cracking book. Okay. So TV show. What are you thinking?
It's having a resurgence at the moment. So I recently rewatched the entirety of it. But the last Airbender, Avatar, is just. It is an utterly phenomenal show. It is maybe the best animated show ever made. And I don't say that lightly. It is just so incredible. The world building is absolutely phenomenal. All the characters are like just nice to watch. You want to know what happens to them. But all of them have flaws. All of them have redeeming characteristics. That's the heroes and the villains. Zuko's arc is one of the best villain arcs in any show that I've watched. As a magic system, I prefer soft magic, Tolkien-esque kind of, magic, who knows what it does kind of thing. But as a hard magic system, it is perfect. You know what the rules are. These people can do all sorts of cool things with it. Oh, it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant. Everything about it is perfectly constructed. I cannot recommend it enough.
I cannot agree more. I think it's a gorgeous series. Would you want a movie?
But I want a movie. Well, we got an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
No, we didn't.
Which he produced 90 minutes of stuff. I don't know if I'd call it a movie, but yes, I would like a better one, please. But it shouldn't be a retelling of the story in the TV show. Why would you paint over the Mona Lisa? Why would you why would you do that? If you want to add, which maybe you shouldn't, because it's a perfect standalone piece of art. But if you wanted to add anything to it, then animate one of the comics or something, because there's loads of comics that followed on from it. Korra is obviously incredibly popular. I want to know a bit about the in-between. A lot of it is probably better untold, but if there's a good enough story, then do it. If you can produce anything that's anywhere near as good as the original series, yes, I do want a film. If you can't, then don't, is what I'm trying to say.
Would you make it a hard option that has to be animated, or would you? Okay, so let's put you in this position. You have the rights of Avatar: The Last Airbender, so those do belong to you. You are approached by an animation company and a live-action company. Both of them have the same story.
Okay.
I don't know what that story is.
It has to be animated, doesn't it? I don't know where this sort of conception of live action as like the final form of media has come from. But like, have you watched any of the Disney live action films?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name names, but a couple of them have been terrible, like absolutely terrible. I've maybe enjoyed one of them. The originals are absolutely incredible films. They're absolutely brilliant. So why? Because apart from money, apart from money, we know it's money.
Yes,
Disney, live action is not the final form of a story. A story can be told in in any media at all. And actually, animation can do loads more than real life can. Each frame of animation costs the same, whether you've got phenomenal, incredible special effects and stuff that would require wire work or not, or if it's dialogue. Every frame costs the same. So cost obviously is important, but it's far less important than these sort of like, instead of hiring writers, clearly M. Night Shyamalan just spent it all on visual effects. Like you don't need to spread your budget out in that same way. You can produce phenomenal films within those constraints. What's the best Spider-Man film ever? Probably Into the Spider-Verse, in my personal opinion. Like there's some fantastic Spider-Man films, but I just think the visuals in that film are just unparalleled, and you couldn't get that in a live action film.
Absolutely incredible. Although I would pay good money to see Nick Cage dressed as noir Spider-Man. Like I'd pay good money for that.
Yeah, I mean, just the interactions between him and that Rubik's Cube are there. It's such a tiny part of the film, but just I'm taking this with me. I don't know what it means. It's like, oh, prime Nick Cage. It's so good.
I think there's a whole conversation there about animation versus live action, but as a broad strokes agreement, 100% agree.
Obviously, I'm being very reductive because I have 2 minutes to express my opinion on the podcast, and I have to information dump. But yeah, I think broadly, yeah.
And this is forever out there now. That's how everyone's going to view your opinions.
Sorry, everyone.
Those 2 minute information dump.
Yeah, come and abuse me on my Twitter.
Yeah, at nerd homework. Just saying.
Yeah,
podcast being
or is
dropped.
it Nerd Homework Podcast? I think. I can't remember.
Oh no!
I think.
What's he done?
Oh no! It's one of the two. Okay. It's the one with the pixel art. There's pixel art of me and 2 other people. That's
okay.
The one.
Do you know? As you like, do you know what we're going to do? So there's a tiny bit left at the end of the podcast that we're going to talk about. While that's happening, my producer is desperately going to try and find the right one to let us know.
It has no tweets.
Which one it is.
We haven't done anything because we haven't released anything yet.
But the thing is, when this does drop, you will have a podcast live.
This is true. This is
the magic of the internet.
If I was a betting man, I would bet Nerd Homework Podcast at Nerd Homework Podcast. So I'm going to stick with that.
My producer's furiously typing on her phone. Either that, or she's got bored and she's just decided to just go on Twitter. Because she listens to my voice pretty much on a daily basis at this point. So there's a good chance that she zones out when I'm talking and just zones back in when you're talking. But she's doing that. Okay, so while she's doing that,
if you can't find it, really don't worry. There's nothing on it yet. So you know, there's nothing to find.
She'll figure it out. So while that's happening, the very final question, which is the most important question, it's life. Yeah. It's life defining. Yeah, go on.
It is called Nerd Homework Pod.
There we go. Incredible. Why have I done that? Okay, after extensive research, we've discovered it's Nerd Homework Pod. I'm sorry, everyone. I should have known my own Twitter. I haven't, I'm editing at the moment. I don't know anything about social media.
Like everyone was backing you throughout the entire podcast until it got to that bit.
Yeah, till exactly that moment when they realized the scumbag I am.
Yeah, everyone parachutes out of the plane. Okay, so the final question, the defining question, how people will forever judge you. Mm-hmm. Dirty Dancing or Footloose?
Oh my God. Oh, Footloose is a good film, but nobody puts Baby in the corner, right?
So is that a strong vote for Dirty Dancing?
That has got to be a strong vote for Dirty Dancing. It is the sweatiest film maybe I've ever seen, but there's a lot to be said for it.
It's a very sweaty film. It's true. I've never really thought about that before, but it is a very sweaty film. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I mean, if you didn't enjoy this conversation, then you're off your rocker. This has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Zav, man. I appreciate it.
That's all right. Thank you very much for having me. I've had a good time.
Hopefully you folks have picked up 1 or 2 tips. I know I have. And you guys should all just go just rewatch Avatar and buy Colour of Magic and watch 2001: A Space Odyssey in a cinema coming soon.
That is 3 for 3. Is there a prize?
Yes. Yeah, there is a prize. The prize is that you might get to come back one day and go through this all again. And then you have to pick 3 brand new things to be judged
3
on.
more things. Oh, I've only read 1 book ever.
Seen 1 film, watched 1 book. Like
exactly.
someone let you watch Avatar around their house on Netflix that one time.
I've got nothing more to give you.
You just watch that one episode. But thank you so much, guys. We will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And don't forget to tune into Clash of Quests every Saturday. Again, thank you to my guest, Zav. Thanks, guys. Be lucky. Bye.